The red dust of Sagebrush Crossing hung in the afternoon air like crushed rust, coating everything from the weathered storefronts to the rim of coffee cups. Nora McKay wiped the counter of her father's general store for the third time that day, knowing it was futile but needing something to occupy her hands. Through the warped glass window, she watched a lone rider approach down Main Street, his silhouette wavering in the heat shimmer. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, bringing with him the scent of leather, trail dust, and something else, a memory she'd tried to bury. Jesse Calder removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached hair and eyes the color of winter creek water. 5 years had carved new lines around those eyes, but the crooked smile was the same. "Afternoon, Nora." His voice was rougher now, seasoned by wind and distance. She kept her expression neutral, though her pulse quickened. "Jesse, heard you had a spread up by Concho Creek now." "Small place. Nothing fancy." He shifted his weight, boots creaking on the pine floor. "I'm not here to stir up old dust." "Then why are you here?" Instead of answering, Jesse reached inside his duster and withdrew a battered envelope, its edges foxed with age and what looked like dried mud or blood. He placed it on the counter between them. The Blue Wren Mining Company seal was barely visible through the grime. Nora's hand hesitated before picking it up. Inside, she found a promissory note dated 5 years prior, the amount staggering $800. But it was the signature that made her breath catch Angus McKay, with that peculiar way he wrote his G that looked more like a Q. "Where did you get this?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "That's the complicated part." Jesse glanced toward the window where Silas Doone's hired men often loitered. Today the street was empty, save for Mrs. Hutchins sweeping her stoop. "There's more. A piece of map. Looks like—" She unfolded the second paper, revealing a partial diagram of what appeared to be mine tunnels. Someone had marked Auxiliary Shaft 3 in pencil, with numbers that might have been dates or depths. "My father's been gone 5 years, she said carefully. "Everyone knows what happened. The cargo run to the mine, the accident." "Wasn't an accident." Jesse's jaw tightened. "I was running freight for Blue Wren back then. That night your father disappeared. I saw things that made me saddle up and ride out before dawn." The store suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Nora had spent years accepting the official story her father's wagon found overturned in Skeleton Wash. No body recovered, presumed swept away by flash flood. The town had mourned appropriately, moved on appropriately. She'd kept the store running, taught letters to the miners' children in the evenings, made herself indispensable to the community, safe, respectable. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come back with this now?" Jesse's fingers drummed once on the counter. "Because I've been north, working the railroad camps, heard stories, men who owe the company's store. They don't always die. Sometimes they just disappear, work off their debts in places the law doesn't look." "That's absurd. This isn't the Congo. It's New Mexico territory." "You ever wonder why the Blue Wren's profits keep climbing when half their shafts played out 2 years ago?" Before Nora could respond, the door burst open. Tommy Brennan, all of 8 years old and missing his front teeth, skidded to a stop. "Miss Nora Ma says to tell you Sheriff's gone to Silver City. Won't be back for a week." She fished a peppermint from the jar. "Thank you." "Tommy, tell your mother I'll have her fabric order ready tomorrow." The boy grabbed the candy and darted out, nearly colliding with a figure in the doorway. Horace Pike stepped aside with practiced grace, his gray suit immaculate despite the dust. The banker's smile never quite reached his eyes. "Miss McKay and Mr. Calder, isn't it I heard you'd return to our humble town?" Pike's gaze drifted to the papers on the counter. "Conducting business." Nora's hand moved to cover the documents, but Jesse was faster, sliding them into his shirt. "Just catching up on old times." "How pleasant." Pike adjusted his gold watch chain. "I do hope you're not filling Miss McKay's head with those dreadful stories that circulate in the camps. Railroad workers can be so imaginative." Nothing but the truth, Jesse said mildly. Pike's smile thinned. Truth is such a flexible concept out here, isn't it? Why, just last week, I had a miner swear his wife sent him payment for their loan. Terrible liar. Had to foreclose, naturally. He tipped his hat to Nora. Good day, Miss McKay. Do give my regards to your evening students. After Pike left, Nora realized she'd been holding her breath. Through the window, she could see him speaking to someone, a shadow moving in the alley between the bank and the hotel. Silas Doone stepped into view, his hand resting casual-like on the Colt at his hip. They know, Jesse said quietly. That envelope was supposed to disappear. Someone at the mine grew a conscience or got careless. Nora's mind raced. The children would arrive for lessons in 2 hours. Mrs. Garrett needed her tonic for her joints. The store needed running. The town needed its routines. But that signature, that impossible G that looked like a Q. There's a line shack about 3 miles north of my place. Jesse continued. I've got more than just papers. Got a ledger, names, dates. But Nora. He caught her gaze. If we start pulling this thread, it all might unravel. Your life here, everything you've built. She thought of 5 years of carefully constructed days, of being the respectable shopkeeper's daughter who never caused trouble, never asked uncomfortable questions. Then she thought of her father's hands, scarred from honest work, teaching her to write that peculiar G. The children will need another teacher if... She stopped, squared her shoulders. When do we leave? Jesse's smile was grim. Storm's coming in tonight, new moon. If we're going to move, it should be then. As if in response to his words, the wind picked up outside, rattling the windows. Dust devils danced down Main Street, and the sky to the west had taken on the yellow-brown tinge that promised a sandstorm. Nora moved through the familiar motions of closing the store, her mind already racing ahead. She'd need supplies, her father's old rifle, the good lantern, and so many answers. Nora! Jesse had moved to the door but turned back. That night, when your father... I should have stayed, should have said something. You would have ended up in Skeleton Wash too. She met his eyes steadily. Or worse, from the sound of it. Maybe, but I've carried it for 5 years. The wondering if he might have... He shook his head. I'll be at the old Cottonwood Grove after full dark. If you change your mind, I'll understand. After he left, Nora locked the door and pulled down the shades. In the back room, she lifted a loose floorboard and withdrew her father's navy Colt, wrapped in oilcloth. Beneath it lay a small leather journal she'd kept meaning to burn, but never could. Her father's notes from his last weeks, full of worried observations about the mine's bookkeeping, about men who went in but didn't come out. She'd convinced herself they were the paranoid ramblings of a man working too hard, seeing shadows where none existed. Now Jesse Calder had walked back into her life with proof that the shadows had teeth. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Though no rain would come, it never did anymore. Just wind and dust and the endless appetite of the Blue Wren Mining Company, feeding on the desperate and the indebted. Nora strapped on the gun belt, feeling its unfamiliar weight. Through the walls, she could hear the town preparing for the storm shutters slamming, horses being stabled, mothers calling children inside, normal sounds of normal people living normal lives. Tomorrow, if anyone asked, they'd say Nora McKay had lost her mind with grief, chasing ghost stories into the desert. They'd shake their heads and replace her within a week. The general store would get a new proprietor, and Sagebrush Crossing would continue its slow dance with the mining company that owned half the buildings and most of the souls. But tonight, with the storm bearing down and Jesse Calder waiting by the Cottonwood Grove, Nora McKay was done being respectable. She tucked the journal into her saddlebags, along with ammunition, water, and hardtack. The wind howled as she led her mare from the stable, and the first stinging grains of sand hit her face. Somewhere in that storm, her father might still be alive. And if he was, God help anyone who stood between her and bringing him home. The morning after the storm found Sagebrush Crossing buried under a fine layer of red dust. Nora swept the store's entrance, her movements automatic while her mind churned over the revelations from Jesse's line shack. The ledger he'd shown her contained shipping manifests that didn't match, payments for workers who'd supposedly died months earlier, and coded references to special cargo moving through Auxiliary Shaft 3. The market square buzzed with its weekly trade. Miners' wives haggled over vegetables while their husbands nursed hangovers from the Yellow Dog Saloon. Nora approached the bank, her father's old deposit papers tucked in her basket beneath fresh eggs from Mrs. Odom. Horace Pike greeted her with his merchant's smile, all teeth and calculation. "Miss McKay. How fortuitous. I was just reviewing your father's accounts." "Were you now?" She kept her tone light. 5 years later. "Due diligence, my dear. The territorial auditors are becoming quite thorough." He gestured to a chair. "I'm afraid there's the matter of your father's outstanding loan." Nora sat carefully. "What loan? My father paid cash for everything." Pike produced a document with theatrical regret. "Not according to this $800, borrowed against future freight earnings, with interest compounded annually." He made a show of calculating. "The estate owes nearly $2,000. She recognized the promissory note identical to the one Jesse had shown her, down to the suspicious signature. But this one bore additional witnesses, 2 names she didn't recognize, and Silas Doone's scrawl. "This is forged," she said flatly. "Such accusations could damage your reputation." Pike's voice carried steel beneath silk. "However, I might be convinced to forgive the debt. The mining company needs someone respectable to manage their commissary, someone the workers trust, someone to keep their families quiet when they disappear." His smile never wavered. "People leave boomtowns all the time, seeking fortune elsewhere." Nora stood, clutching her basket. "I need time to review my father's papers." "Of course, though I should mention the territorial judge visits next month. These matters are best settled locally. Don't you think?" Outside, the sun felt like a brand on her neck. She nearly collided with Reverend Townsend, his round face flushed with heat and exertion. "Nora, blessing to see you." He lowered his voice. "Might I have a word privately?" They walked to the church, a modest adobe structure that served all denominations. Inside, the Reverend checked the empty pews before speaking. "I performed last rites yesterday. Old Josiah Briggs worked the mine for 20 years. He pulled a flask from his coat water. She noted with relief. On his deathbed, he spoke of things, dark things, men kept underground, working off debts that grow faster than they can dig. "Why tell me?" "Because he mentioned your father. Said he'd seen Angus McKay alive. 3 months ago, in the shaft they call the Dark House." Nora gripped the back of a pew. 3 months ago. Josiah's mind wandered near the end, but he was lucid when he said it, grabbed my hand, made me promise to tell you. She left the church with her thoughts racing. At the Yellow Dog Saloon, the afternoon crowd was thin, mostly old-timers who'd drunk away their claims. She found who she was looking for at a corner table, Marcus Webb, former shift boss at the Blue Wren, now surviving on charity and rot-gut whiskey. "I don't talk about the mine," he slurred when she sat down. She placed a silver dollar on the scarred wood. "Just listen then. Auxiliary Shaft 3, the Dark House, special cargo." Webb's bloodshot eyes widened. He glanced around, then leaned in. "You didn't hear nothing from me." "I'm just buying you a drink, Marcus." He pocketed the dollar with shaking hands. "Shaft 3 ain't for silver. It's for men who can't pay what they owe. Company keeps 'em down there, working. Books show 'em dead, but they ain't got guards, chains, like something from the old country, before Lincoln's War." How many?" 20, 30 maybe. Hard to say. They don't come up often. And when they do..." He mimed a finger across his throat. "Accident. Cave-in. Flash flood. Whatever fits." "Where exactly?" Northwest side, past the main works. Look for the iron posts marked D3. That's Dune's section. Webb stood unsteadily. I said too much. You didn't see me. As he stumbled out, Nora noticed two men at the bar watching her. She recognized one from the group that followed Dune. Time to leave. Jesse was reshoeing a horse when she arrived at his ranch. The small spread looked well-tended but sparse, the home of a man who hadn't put down roots. "Productive morning?" he asked, not looking up from the horse's hoof. She related her encounters while he worked. His jaw tightened at Pike's threat. "He's moving fast. Means something's got him worried." Jesse released the horse's leg and straightened. "The territorial Judge Pike mentioned that's Abraham Morse. Straight as they come, if evidence reached him." "We need proof. Real proof." Nora paced the small corral. "Can you still ride like you used to?" A ghost of his old grin surfaced. "Better. Staying alive on the trail teaches you things." "Good, because I can barely stay on a horse anymore." She stopped pacing. Decision made. "Teach me. If we're going to that shaft, I won't be the liability that gets us caught." "Nora." "Don't. I spent 5 years behind a counter, being safe and respectable. My father might be alive in that hole. So you're going to teach me to ride, to shoot, to survive, starting now." He studied her face, then nodded. "All right, but we do this careful. Too much activity. Wrong people notice." The next hours blurred together. Jesse started with basics, checking tack, reading the horse, mounting smoothly. Nora's muscles remembered more than she'd expected, but 5 years of shopkeeping had softened her seat, weakened her grip. "You're fighting her," Jesse called as Nora's mare crow-hopped. "Feel her movement. Work with it." "Easy for you to say," she gasped, gripping the saddle horn. "Here." He swung up behind her, his arms coming around to take the reins. "Feel how I shift weight, small movements, like dancing." She was acutely aware of his presence, the steadiness of his breathing against her back. This was improper, scandalous by town standards. She didn't care. "Better," he murmured as the mare settled into a smooth lope. "You're remembering." They practiced until sunset painted the mesas crimson. Nora's legs trembled when she dismounted, but she felt more alive than she had in years. "Tomorrow we work on rough terrain," Jesse said, leading the horses to water. "Night riding too. If we're going to that mine, we'll need every advantage." "When?" "3 nights, new moon's coming, but Nora—" He turned to face her. "This isn't just about riding in and demanding answers. If what Webb says is true, we're talking about men willing to enslave others, kill to keep secrets." "Then we'd better be ready to kill back." The words surprised her with their coldness. Jesse's expression was unreadable. "That's not the girl who used to sneak sugar to lame horses." "That girl thought her father died in an accident." She met his gaze steadily. "I need to get home before someone notices." "Wait." He disappeared into the cabin, returning with a wrapped bundle. "Your father's Winchester. Found it in the wash. Years back, kept meaning to return it." She unwrapped the rifle, running her fingers over the familiar stock. Her father had taught her to shoot with this gun, patient lessons on Sunday afternoons. "Thank you," she managed past the tightness in her throat. "Nora." Jesse caught her arm as she turned to go. "What Pike offered managing the commissary. It's not just a job. You'd be part of their system. Once you're in—" "I know." She pulled free gently. "That's why we have 3 days." The ride back to town tested her newly refreshed skills. Every shadow could hide Dune's men. Every sound might be pursuit. But she made it to the stable without incident, slipping in through the back door of the store as the last light faded. On her counter sat a package wrapped in brown paper. No name, no address. Inside, she found a woman's riding outfit, split skirt, leather vest, sturdy boots, everything her size. A note in Pike's precise handwriting read, "For your new position, assuming you've reconsidered." She burned the note and hid the clothes. They might prove useful. though not the way Pike intended. That night, she lay awake planning. 3 days to prepare. 3 days to gather supplies without suspicion. 3 days before she and Jesse attempted something that would either free her father or get them all killed. Through her window, she could see the distant lights of the Blue Wren's operations, burning through the night like stars fallen to earth. Somewhere among those lights, in a shaft marked D3, men labored in chains. One of them might be Angus McKay, still writing his G like a Q, still believing someone would come. She would not let that belief be in vain. The storm struck just after midnight, transforming the world into a chaos of sand and wind. Nora pressed her bandana tight against her face as she and Jesse approached the mine's perimeter. The howling gale would mask any sounds they made, but it also meant they were riding nearly blind. There! Jesse's voice barely carried over the storm. Through the swirling dust, the iron posts marked D3 appeared like sentinels. Beyond them, the entrance to Auxiliary Shaft 3 yawned black against the hillside. They tied the horses in a sheltered ravine and approached on foot. The main operations were a quarter-mile south, their lights dimmed by the storm. Jesse had been right, only a skeleton crew would work on a night like this. The shaft entrance was secured with a new padlock. Jesse produced a pair of bolt cutters from his pack. The metal parted with a sharp crack that the wind instantly swallowed. Inside, the sudden stillness felt oppressive after the storm's fury. Nora lit the covered lantern, revealing rough-hewn walls and timber supports. The air tasted of metal and desperation. They descended, following cart tracks that showed recent use despite the shaft's supposedly abandoned status. 50 feet down, the tunnel branched, scratched into a support beam. Holding area level 2, Jesse touched the marks, fresh. "Someone's maintaining this," he whispered. They took the left branch, descending further. The temperature dropped, and moisture seeped through the walls. Then they heard it, the sound of metal on rock, rhythmic, purposeful. Nora dimmed the lantern to its lowest setting. Around a bend, light flickered from an opening. Jesse motioned for her to stay back, but she followed as he crept forward. The chamber beyond defied everything Sagebrush Crossing claimed to believe. 20 men worked by lamplight, some manning picks, others hauling carts. Chains connected their ankles to iron rings in the floor, allowing movement but preventing escape. A guard dozed in a chair, rifle across his lap. Among the workers, a man stumbled under the weight of his load. Another helped steady him, an older black man whose dignity remained intact despite the chains. But Nora's attention fixed on a figure in the far corner, scratching something on the wall with a piece of chalk. She couldn't see his face, but she knew those hands. Jesse's grip on her arm was all that kept her from crying out. They retreated carefully, but at the tunnel branch, voices echoed from above. Someone was coming down. "Storage alcove," Jesse hissed, pulling her into a narrow recess. 2 men descended, one carrying supplies, the other complaining about the storm. Dune wants the old man moved to 7 tomorrow. Says he's stirring up the others. Which old man? Half of them are past 40. The one who keeps writing on the walls? McKay. Nora bit her knuckle to stay silent. Jesse's arm tightened around her. Thought Dune was going to put him down months ago. Pike wants him alive. Insurance. He calls it, long as the daughter stays quiet. The old man's useful. The voices faded as they continued toward the holding area. Jesse and Nora slipped out, but instead of fleeing, she turned toward a side passage marked with a wooden sign, Equipment Storage. "We can't leave them," she whispered. "We can't free them now. 20 men, chains, guards. Then we need proof, evidence." She pushed into the storage area, finding mining tools, spare chains, and jackpot a filing cabinet. Jesse kept watch while she rifled through papers by lantern light. Contracts, delivery receipts, and there a ledger matching the one Jesse had shown her, but this one was complete, showing the full operation. Men's names, debts, real and fabricated, work quotas, punishments for infractions. Her father's name appeared on page after page. Angus McKay acquired for non-payment of fraudulent debt. Work output declining. Status problematic. Recommended for isolation. She stuffed the most damning documents into her coat. A photograph fell out rows of chained men standing before the mine entrance. She recognized her father in the back row. Thinner but unmistakably alive. The photo was dated 2 months ago. Footsteps echoed from the main tunnel. They'd been discovered. Jesse grabbed the lantern. Back exit. Has to be one. They ran deeper into the mountain, following air currents. Behind them, shouts erupted. The narrow passages worked in their favor. The guards couldn't spread out to surround them. A wooden barrier blocked their path. Jesse kicked it down, revealing a natural cave system. They plunged in as rifle fire cracked behind them. The lantern flickered, threatening to die. Wait! Nora grabbed Jesse's arm. Wind touched her face, fresh air from somewhere ahead. They followed it, scrambling over loose rock, until stars appeared through a gap above. They climbed, hearing pursuit growing closer. Jesse boosted Nora up, then hauled himself after her. They emerged on the hillside just as the storm began to break, the last gusts providing cover as they ran for the horses. A rifle cracked. Jesse grunted, stumbling. Blood darkened his shoulder. Go! He gasped. Not without you. She got under his good arm, half dragging him to the ravine. The horses danced nervously as she helped him mount. They rode hard through the dying storm, Jesse swaying but staying in the saddle. Instead of town, Nora headed for the line shack. No one would look for them there immediately. Inside, she lit a fire and examined Jesse's wound by its light. The bullet had passed through the muscle, painful but clean. She'd helped her father treat injured horses. This wasn't so different. This'll hurt, she warned, pouring whiskey over the wound. Jesse hissed through clenched teeth. Already does. She bound the wound with strips from her petticoat, trying not to think about the intimacy of the act. You'll live. Thanks to you, he caught her hand. Nora, what we saw changes everything. She pulled free to tend the fire. 20 men at least. My father. That photograph was recent. Jesse, he's alive. And they know we were there. Come dawn, Dune will tear this territory apart looking for us. She spread the stolen documents on the rough table. Names, dates, amounts a complete record of the Blue Wren shadow operation. Then we'd better make sure the right people see these first. Pike owns half the law in 3 counties. But not all of it. She found what she was looking for, shipping manifests signed by territorial inspectors who couldn't have known what they were authorizing. Judge Morse, you said he was straight. These signatures are forgeries of territorial officials. That's federal. Jesse struggled upright. It's a day's hard ride to Silver City, in your condition. I'm going. She met his gaze. But first, we need a witness. Someone who was there, who can testify. You're thinking of the old man, Ezekiel. She'd noticed how the older black man had helped others despite his own suffering. He's our best chance, but Jesse, she gestured at the evidence. This is bigger than just my father. All those men. I know. His expression was grim. Question is, how do we get one man out without bringing the whole mountain down on us? Nora studied the mine diagrams she'd grabbed. They said they're moving my father to Area 7 tomorrow. That means transport, movement, opportunity. Or a trap. Maybe. But Dune's arrogant. He won't expect us to come back so soon. Jesse tested his shoulder, wincing. I can shoot left-handed if needed. You're in no condition. Neither are you. But that's not stopping us, is it? He managed a wry smile. Besides, I've got 5 years of running to make up for. Outside, dawn approached with a clear sky. The storm had passed, leaving the world scoured clean. Nora thought of the men underground who hadn't seen sunrise in months. Maybe years. Her father, writing on walls with stolen chalk, keeping hope alive through simple acts of defiance. She began planning. They'd need supplies, fresh horses, and above all, timing. If they could intercept the transfer, grab both her father and Ezekiel. "You know this changes everything," Jessie said quietly. "Win or lose, after tomorrow, you can't go back to running the general store." "I know." She looked at the blood on her hands, Jessie's blood. She trying to help her. "Maybe that's not a bad thing." He stood, swaying slightly. "I'll ride to the Tanner place. They owe me favors. We'll need backup, even if it's just someone to hold horses." "Can you make it?" "Have to." He checked his gun, movements careful around his injured shoulder. "Meet back here at sunset. We go in full dark." After he left, Nora sat with the evidence spread before her. 20 men in chains, her father alive but imprisoned. A whole system of debt and forced labor operating under everyone's noses. And her, a shopkeeper's daughter who'd barely fired a gun in anger, preparing to take on men who killed for far less than what she planned. She thought of her comfortable life in town, teaching children their letters, measuring out flour and coffee beans. Safe, respectable, empty. Tomorrow, that life would end one way or another. But today, she had work to do, plans to make, a father to save. And after 5 years of accepting the lie, she was finally ready for the truth, no matter how dark it might be. The sun climbed higher, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. Somewhere, a hawk cried. Nora checked her rifle, counted her ammunition, and began to prepare for war. The town hall had never seen such a crowd. Word of Nora's accusations had spread like wildfire, drawing miners' families, merchants, and curious onlookers. She stood before the assembled council, the stolen documents laid out on the table, while Jesse kept watch by the door, his shoulders still stiff from the bullet wound. Horace Pike sat with the council members, his expression one of polite concern. "Miss McKay has suffered a terrible loss," he began smoothly. "We all understand how grief can cloud judgment." "This isn't about grief." Nora held up the ledger. "It's about 20 men held in chains beneath the Blue Wren mine, men supposedly dead, working to pay debts that never shrink." Councilman Harrison shifted uncomfortably. "These are serious accusations. Do you have proof beyond these, papers?" "I have this." Ezekiel Boone stepped forward from where he'd been waiting. They'd managed to get him out during the chaos of their escape, though he was weakened from months underground. His dignity remained intact as he addressed the room. "My name is Ezekiel Boone. I was taken 14 months ago for a debt I never incurred. I've been forced to work in Auxiliary Shaft 3, along with 19 other men." A murmur ran through the crowd. Pike's smile never wavered. "A touching story, but who's to say this man isn't simply a drifter Miss McKay paid to support her delusions?" "Because I have this," Ezekiel rolled up his sleeve, revealing scars from the shackles and a brand burned into his forearm, BWM, for Blue Wren Mining. "They mark us like cattle." The crowd's murmur grew to angry muttering. Several miners' wives pressed forward. "My husband disappeared last year." One called out. "Said he owed the company store. Is he down there?" "What about my brother?" another demanded. "Told us he died in a cave-in, but they never found a body." Pike stood, raising his hands for calm. "Please, let's not allow emotion to override reason. The Blue Wren has brought prosperity to this town. Jobs, growth, civilization. Built on slavery." Reverend Townsend stood, his usual jovial face stern. "If even half of what Miss McKay claims is true, we're complicit in mortal sin." "Careful, Reverend." Silas Doone lounged against the wall, hand resting on his pistol. "Wouldn't want you saying something you'd regret." Sheriff Hutchins, who'd returned that morning from Silver City, stepped between them. "That sounds like a threat." "Doone!" "Just friendly advice." Nora pressed her advantage. "I have photographs, contracts, work logs, names of territorial officials whose signatures were forged. This isn't just crime, it's conspiracy." "Conspiracy?" Pike laughed. My dear girl, you break into private property, assault security guards, steal documents, and then accuse us of conspiracy. You put my father in chains." The room went silent. Pike's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold beneath. "Your father owed money. He made choices." "You mean you made choices for him?" Jesse spoke for the first time, moving away from the door. "Just like the night 5 years ago when I was driving freight. You had Angus McKay taken because he asked too many questions about your books." Dune's hand tightened on his gun. "Calder, thought you'd learn to keep your mouth shut." "I did, for 5 years. I kept quiet and let it eat at me. No more." Mayor Garrett, who'd remained silent, finally spoke. "These are serious accusations that require investigation. I propose we form a committee." "To do what?" Nora slammed her hand on the table. "Talk while men suffer underground. My father has been enslaved for 5 years." "If he's even alive," Pike interjected. "This could all be an elaborate hoax." "Ma'am?" A small voice interrupted. Young Tommy Brennan, the gap-toothed boy from the general store, squeezed through the crowd. "My PA told me not to, but—" He held out a crumpled paper. "Found this tucked in the hymnal at church. It's got writing like you taught us." Nora took the paper with trembling hands, her father's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. "Trust in truth. Hold fast. A.M." "Where did this come from?" she asked gently. "The new janitor at church. He comes up from the mine sometimes. Has chains on his feet under his trousers. I seen him when he was scrubbing floors." The crowd erupted. Pike's carefully constructed meeting dissolved into chaos as people shouted questions, accusations, demands for answers. Dune's men moved closer to their boss, hands on weapons. Sheriff Hutchins raised his voice. "Order, I'll have order." When the crowd quieted, he continued, "I'm organizing an inspection of the mine tomorrow morning. Anyone interfering will be arrested." "You don't have authority," Pike began. "I have a telegram from Judge Morse." The sheriff produced the paper. "Given the evidence presented, he's authorized a full investigation. Federal marshals are en route." Pike's face went pale. He whispered urgently to Dune, who nodded and slipped out the side door with 2 of his men. "They're going to move the prisoners," Jesse said urgently. "Or worse." Nora caught the sheriff's arm. "We can't wait until morning. They'll destroy evidence, hurt the men." "I can't sanction vigilante action, Miss McKay." "Then don't sanction it. Just don't stop it." Hutchins studied her for a long moment, then turned to address the crowd. "I'll be at my office all night, filing paperwork. Very busy. Probably won't hear anything happening elsewhere." The meeting broke up in confusion. Some townspeople headed home. Others gathered in small groups, voices angry. Several miners approached Nora. "We're with you." One said simply, "Tell us what you need." Within an hour, she had a dozen volunteers miners who'd lost friends, wives who'd lost husbands, men who were simply fed up with the Blue Wren's stranglehold on their lives. Jesse organized them with military efficiency despite his injury. "We go in 2 groups," he explained at the abandoned barn they'd chosen as a meeting point. "One to the main gate as distraction, the other to shaft 3. "I'm going for my father," Nora said. "I know. That's why I'm going with you." As night fell, their ragtag force moved out. The distraction team, led by the tough old blacksmith Samuel Crawford, would make noise at the main entrance, drawing guards. Meanwhile, Nora's group would hit the auxiliary shaft. The plan worked at first. Guards rushed to investigate Crawford's very loud, very drunk miners' protest at the main gate. Nora's team slipped into shaft 3 undetected. But the holding area was empty. Only scattered tools and chains remained. "They moved them," Ezekiel said, reading the signs. "Recently, maybe an hour." Area 7. Nora remembered. They were taking my father there anyway. Deeper into the mine they went, following Ezekiel's knowledge of the layout. They found bodies 2 prisoners who died during the hasty relocation, left behind in the rush. Nora forced herself to look, to remember. Neither was her father. Voices echoed ahead. They crept forward to find a shocking scene, the remaining prisoners huddled in a dead-end chamber while Dune and his men planted explosive charges. "Cave in," one guard was saying. "Tragic accident. All evidence buried." "What about Pike's insurance?" another asked. "Plans changed. Boss says clean slate is better than leverage." Nora felt Jesse's hand on her arm, holding her back. They were outnumbered 3-1, but then she saw him, her father, thinner and grayer but unmistakably alive, standing protectively in front of younger prisoners. She made her choice. "Stop!" She stepped into view, rifle raised. "Nobody moves." Dune turned, actually smiling. "Miss McKay, saving me the trouble of hunting you down." The next moments blurred. Gunfire erupted. Jesse shoved Nora behind cover as bullets sparked off stone. Their volunteers returned fire. In the confusion, Ezekiel led prisoners away from the blast zone. Dune advanced on Nora's position, firing steadily. "Should have taken Pike's offer, girl." Jesse rose to return fire, but his wounded shoulder betrayed him. His shot went wide. Dune aimed, and Angus McKay hit him with a pickaxe handle. 5 years of forced labor had left the old man thin but strong. Dune went down hard. "Nora!" Angus's voice broke. "My little girl." She ran to him, tears streaming. "Papa, I found you!" Their reunion was cut short by a sound that chilled everyone, the hiss of lit fuses. "The charges!" someone screamed. Jesse was already moving, knife in hand, cutting fuses with desperate efficiency. Others joined him, racing against time. Most were extinguished, but one detonated early, bringing down part of the ceiling. Dust and debris filled the air. When it cleared, they were trapped the exit blocked by tons of rock, but they were alive. And more importantly, they had witnesses. 20 men who could testify to what the Blue Wren had done. It took 6 hours to dig out, Crawford's team breaking through from the other side. They emerged to find the dawn breaking and federal marshals surrounding the mine. Pike was in custody, caught trying to flee with saddlebags full of gold. Sheriff Hutchins met them, relief plain on his face. "Judge Morse arrived an hour ago. He wants statements from everyone." As the freedmen were led to safety, Nora stood with her father, neither quite believing it was real. 5 years, Angus said quietly. "I wrote your name on every wall, hoping someday—" "I know, Papa, I know." Jesse approached, cradling his re-injured shoulder. "Hate to interrupt, but Dune's coming around. Sheriff wants to know if you want to press charges for the attempted murder underground." "Every charge we can think of," Nora said firmly. Then, softer, "Thank you, Jesse, for everything." He touched his hat brim, a ghost of his old smile returning. "Just keeping a 5-year-old promise." As the sun climbed higher, painting Sagebrush Crossing in golden light, Nora looked around at the changed landscape. The mine would likely close. The town would struggle, but 20 men were free. And justice, real justice, had finally come to their small corner of the frontier. It was, she thought, a good start. The line shack sat lonely against the darkening sky, a small refuge where the vast emptiness of the territory pressed close. Rain pattered against the tin roof, an unusual blessing in this dry country. Inside, the fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the rough walls. Nora finished binding Jesse's shoulder, which had opened again during the confrontation in the mine. He sat shirtless on the wooden bench, trying not to wince as she worked. The lamplight revealed other scars, a map of survival written on his skin. "You're lucky this didn't go deeper," she said, securing the bandage. "Lucky seems to be following me lately." His voice was warm despite the pain. She busied herself cleaning up the medical supplies, aware of his eyes on her. They'd been taking turns watching over Ezekiel, who slept fitfully on the narrow cot, still recovering from his ordeal. The storm had driven them here after leaving the other freedmen in the doctor's care. "You should rest too," Jessie said. Been a long day. I'm too wound up to sleep. She moved to the window, watching rain streak the glass. Keep thinking about all those months my father was down there, and I was serving coffee and teaching arithmetic like nothing was wrong. You didn't know. But I should have questioned more, pushed harder. She pressed her palm against the cool glass. I accepted their lies because it was easier than fighting. Jessie stood, moving behind her. Not touching, just present. You fought when it mattered. Did I? She turned to face him, finding him closer than expected. Or did I just get lucky that you came back with that envelope? Nora. His good hand reached up, fingers barely grazing her cheek. You walked into that mine knowing you might not walk out. That's not luck. That's courage. The firelight caught in his eyes, turning them amber. She was acutely aware of the small space between them, the sound of rain, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. Jessie! She started, then stopped. The question had been building for days, maybe years. She'd seen the women who followed the railroad camps, knew the kind of company a man might seek in lonely towns. The thought of him with faceless others through all those wandering years created an ache she didn't want to examine. What is it? His voice was gentle. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Do you sleep alone, Cowboy? She heard herself ask, not wanting the answer. Jessie went very still. The rain drummed harder, filling the silence. Then his expression softened with understanding. Nora. He moved his hand from her cheek to her hand, holding it carefully. You asking what I think you're asking? She couldn't meet his eyes. I have no right to know. It's been 5 years. You don't owe me anything. Hey. He waited until she looked up. Yes, I've been alone. Not always by myself. Maybe, but alone. He struggled with the words. There's a difference between sharing a bedroll and sharing a life. Never found anyone I wanted to build something with. Never stopped thinking about. He didn't finish, but she understood. The unspoken name hung between them like a promise. I saw the handkerchief, she admitted, the one with L embroidered on it. Despite everything, he chuckled. Lucy, my sister in Kansas, sends me one every Christmas, thinking I'll use it to impress some lady. He pulled it from his pocket, showing her the full embroidery, LC, for Lucy Calder. Mostly I use it to clean my guns. Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by embarrassment. I'm an idiot. No. He stepped closer, their joined hands between them. You're someone who cares enough to be jealous. Do you know how long I've wanted that? The storm outside intensified, but inside the small shack, the world narrowed to just them. Nora reached up with her free hand, fingertips tracing the edge of the bandage she'd just tied. I was so afraid I'd lost you in that mine, she whispered. When Dune was shooting, when the explosives went off. I'm here. He released her hand to wrap his good arm around her waist, pulling her against him. I'm not running anymore. Nora, not from you, not from anything. She could feel his heartbeat against her chest, steady and strong. The question that had tormented her was answered not in words, but in the way he held her like she was precious, worth waiting for. Jessie, she breathed, and then his lips found hers. The kiss was nothing like the chaste pecks she'd exchanged with boys at church socials years ago. This was hunger and promise and 5 years of dreams. His hand tangled in her hair, and she pressed closer, careful of his wounded shoulder. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I sleep alone, he said softly. Have for years, but I don't want to anymore. She pulled back to see his face, finding vulnerability there that the tough cowboy facade usually hid. Jessie Calder, are you proposing something improper? I'm proposing something very proper. His thumb stroked her cheek. Soon as this mess is settled, I want to court you right. Church socials, Sunday dinners, the whole thing. And then, he grinned, the expression boyish. Then I'll propose something permanent. That's very traditional for a man who's spent 5 years on the drift. Maybe I'm tired of drifting. He guided her to the bench, sitting carefully and pulling her down beside him. That little ranch of mine could be something with the right partner. Someone who knows business, can handle people. Someone who doesn't back down from a fight. She curled into his side, mindful of his injury. Someone who asks inappropriate questions. Especially then. He pressed a kiss to her hair. Though next time you want to know about my sleeping arrangements, just ask directly. I'll keep that in mind. She yawned, the exhaustion finally catching up. We should check on Ezekiel. I looked while you were getting the bandages. He's sleeping peaceful. First real rest he's had in months, I'd wager. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, thunder rolled across the desert, and the rain showed no signs of stopping. They'd have to stay put until morning. Nora, Jesse's voice was thoughtful. What you said about teaching arithmetic and serving coffee, that's not nothing. You held that town together, gave those kids hope. Your father would be proud. He'd be prouder of what we did today. Maybe, but I think he'd be proudest that you never lost yourself. Even when you thought he was gone, you kept being the woman he raised. That takes its own kind of courage. She turned in his embrace, studying his face in the firelight. When did you get so wise? Somewhere between here and Kansas, I guess. Had a lot of time to think about what matters. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the storm. Eventually, Nora dozed against his chest, feeling safer than she had in years. Jesse held her, ignoring the ache in his shoulder, content to watch the fire and plan a future that finally seemed possible. Near dawn, Ezekiel stirred. He took in the scene Nora asleep in Jesse's arms and smiled quietly. Good, he said simply, then turned back to the wall, giving them privacy. When Nora woke, stiff from sleeping upright, she found Jesse watching her with soft eyes. Morning, he said. Morning. She stretched. Then reality crashed back. We need to get back. The marshals will want statements. And Papa... Your father's safe, probably driving the doctor crazy with questions. Jesse helped her stand. But you're right. Time to face what comes next. As they prepared to leave, Nora paused at the door. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. The sun painted the desert in shades of gold and pink. It's beautiful, she said. It is. But Jesse wasn't looking at the landscape. She smiled, taking his offered hand. Come on, Cowboy, let's go home. They rode back toward Sagebrush Crossing together, Ezekiel on a borrowed horse between them. The future was uncertain. The mine would close. The town would change. There would be trials and upheaval. But for the first time in 5 years, Nora McKay felt like she could face whatever came. She glanced at Jesse, who rode with the easy grace of a man comfortable in his own skin, and thought about his words from the night before. He didn't want to sleep alone anymore. Neither did she. The morning sun cast long shadows as the inspection team assembled outside Sagebrush Crossing. Sheriff Hutchins led the group, with Judge Abraham Morse beside him, a stern man whose reputation for fairness preceded him. Nora rode with Jesse, while Reverend Townsend, Samuel Crawford the blacksmith, and several freed miners completed their party. Stay close, Jesse murmured to Nora. Something feels off. He was right. The Blue Wren compound was too quiet, the usual bustle of morning shift change absent. As they approached the main gate, Horace Pike emerged with papers in hand, flanked by territorial guards, not his usual thugs. Gentlemen, Miss McKay. Pike's smile was oily confidence. I've been expecting you. As you can see, I've arranged for a full internal inspection to address these baseless allegations. Nothing internal about it, Judge Morse said flatly. This is a federal investigation. Of course, you'll find everything in order. Pike gestured expansively. Shall we begin with the main shafts? I'm afraid Auxiliary Shaft 3 suffered a terrible cave-in last night, completely inaccessible. Nora started forward, but Jessie caught her arm. Sheriff Hutchins spoke first. Convenient timing for a cave-in. Mining is dangerous work. Sheriff, these things happen. They proceeded to the main operations, Pike leading them through sanitized areas where miners worked under normal conditions. Everything appeared legitimate timesheets, safety equipment, even a new medical station. As you can see, Pike said smoothly, the Blue Wren maintains the highest standards. Where's Area 7? Nora interrupted. Pike's eye twitched. I'm not familiar with that designation. Strange. Your man Dune seemed very familiar with it last night. Mr. Dune no longer works for this company. He was dismissed for excessive violence. Judge Moore studied Pike. And where is Mr. Dune now? I couldn't say. He left rather suddenly. They were getting nowhere. Pike had covered his tracks, probably destroyed evidence, maybe even had the remaining prisoners moved. Nora felt desperation rising when Ezekiel stepped forward. Judge, might I show you something? The older man's dignity commanded attention. Been working these tunnels over a year. Know them better than any map. Pike's composure cracked. This man is clearly confused. This man, Judge Moore said coldly, bears your company brand on his arm. I'd like to hear what he has to say. Ezekiel led them away from Pike's prescribed route, down older passages. The territorial guards followed uncertainly, while Pike protested about safety violations. They reached a section marked Condemned No Entry. Through here, Ezekiel said. That area's been sealed for years. Pike insisted. Structurally unsound. But Jessie was already examining the barriers. Fresh tool marks. This was opened recently. Sheriff Hutchins ordered the boards removed. Beyond lay a narrow passage, and at its end, a heavy iron door with a viewing slot, the kind used in prisons. No, Pike said quickly. That's just old equipment storage. Nora grabbed the keys from a wall hook and opened the door before anyone could stop her. The stench hit first unwashed bodies, waste, despair. Then her eyes adjusted to the dimness. 7 men huddled in the small space, chained to the walls. Among them, her father. Papa. What followed happened fast. Pike tried to run. Crawford tackled him with a blacksmith's efficiency. The territorial guards, faced with evidence of false imprisonment, quickly switched sides. Within minutes, Pike was in shackles while the prisoners were freed. Nora cradled her father's head in her lap as Doc Morrison examined him. Angus was dehydrated, malnourished, but alert. My brave girl, he whispered. Knew you'd come. Save your strength, she said through tears. Judge Morse documented everything, the chains, the brands, the conditions. Each freed man gave their name and story. The evidence was overwhelming. But they still hadn't found Dune. Check the shaft, one prisoner said weakly. Heard explosions last night. He was setting charges everywhere. Jessie and Crawford led a team to investigate. They found Dune exactly where Jessie had suspected in the mine office. Burning documents. The moment Dune saw them, he drew his gun. Should have minded your own business. Calder. Jessie didn't bother with words. The 2 men faced each other across the cluttered office, hands hovering over their weapons. Nora appeared in the doorway behind Jessie. Get back, he said without turning. No. She raised her father's Winchester. This ends now. Dune laughed. The shopkeeper's daughter thinks she's a gunfighter. I think I'm someone who's tired of men like you. Her voice was steady as the rifle barrel. You enslaved my father. Tried to bury 20 men alive. Give me one reason not to shoot. Because you're not a killer, Dune said confidently. You're a good little... Jessie saw Dune's slight movement and reacted. Both men drew simultaneously. 2 shots cracked as one. Dune's bullet splintered the door frame by Nora's head. Jessie's found its mark. Dune looked down at the spreading red on his shirt. Surprised, he dropped to his knees, then forward. The papers he'd been burning scattered, some still smoldering. Crawford quickly stamped out the flames, saving what documents he could, among them correspondence with buyers in Colorado, showing the Blue Wren had been selling silver mined by enslaved men at enormous profit. "Jesse!" Nora dropped the rifle and ran to him. "You're bleeding!" He looked down at his side where Dune's bullet had grazed him. "Just a scratch. Matches the other side now." Sheriff Hutchins arrived with the judge. They took in the scene Dune's body, the saved documents, Jesse bleeding but standing. "Self-defense," the sheriff said. It wasn't a question. "He drew first." Crawford confirmed. "Would have killed them both." Judge Morse nodded. "Get that wound tended. Mr. Calder, then I'll need your statement." As Doc Morrison patched up Jesse for the second time in as many days, Nora stayed close. "You saved my life." "You saved mine first," he reminded her, in more ways than one. The rest of the day passed in a blur of testimony and documentation. Pike broke under questioning, revealing the full network which territorial officials had been bribed, where other such operations might exist, how the debt slavery system worked. It would take months to unravel it all. But the Blue Wren's stranglehold on Sagebrush Crossing was broken. As evening approached, they gathered outside the mine. The freedmen were being transported to town for proper medical care. Families had been notified. Reunions were beginning to happen, tears, embraces, the painful joy of resurrection. Angus McKay, cleaned up and fed, stood shakily beside his daughter. "Jesse Calder," he said formally, "I owe you a debt." Jesse shook his head. "No, sir, I owed you one. 5 years late in paying it." Still, Angus studied the younger man. "A father notices things, even from a prison cell. I heard about the cowboy who'd come back, the one helping my daughter." "Papa," Nora warned. "I'm just saying," Angus continued, "that when I get my strength back, I expect to see you at Sunday dinner, regular-like." Jesse grinned. "I'd be honored, sir." Reverend Townsend approached. "I'm organizing a service of Thanksgiving tomorrow. These men want to praise God for their deliverance." "And after that," Sheriff Hutchins added, "we start rebuilding this town without the Blue Wren's corruption." As the group began to disperse, Nora and Jesse found themselves alone by the mine entrance. The setting sun painted the mountains crimson, and the first stars were appearing. "It's over," Nora said quietly. "The fighting is—" Jesse took her hand. "The rest is just beginning." She leaned into him, careful of his bandaged side. "What happens now, the mine will close. The town might die. Or it might live for the first time in years." He pointed to where families were reuniting. "Look at them. Free men, free families. That's worth any economic hardship." Very philosophical for a cowboy. "I have my moments." He grew serious. "Nora, I meant what I said last night, about courting you proper, about building something together." She smiled up at him. "I know. And Jesse, the answer is yes." "I haven't asked the question yet." "You will." They stood together as darkness fell over Sagebrush Crossing. Tomorrow would bring challenges, trials, testimony, the hard work of justice. The town would have to find new ways to survive without blood money. But tonight, 20 men were free, families were whole, and in the shadow of a mine that had meant death, life was beginning again. The lantern Nora had carried into the tunnels sat nearby, its flame steady in the still air. She thought of all the dark places it had illuminated, all the truth it had helped reveal. Such a small light, but enough to push back the darkness. Jesse followed her gaze. "We should keep that, mount it somewhere. Remember what one light can do." "I'd like that," she said. As they walked back toward town, the stars bright overhead, Nora felt the weight of the last few days settling into her bones. But it was a good weight, the kind that came from carrying something important and setting it down safely. Behind them, the Blue Wren mine stood silent. Soon it would be sealed, its dark secrets exposed to daylight. But ahead lay Sagebrush Crossing, wounded but healing, and a future they would build together. The trail to Dry Willow Gulch stretched through country that seemed forgotten by rain. Sagebrush and scattered cacti marked the miles, while overhead, vultures circled on thermals rising from the baked earth. Nora had learned to ration water carefully over the past 3 days, measuring each sip against the distance remaining. Jesse rode beside her, his movements easy despite the healing wounds. Behind them, Sheriff Hutchins led a posse of 8 men, including Crawford and 2 federal marshals. They followed the railroad spur that the Blue Wren had built, rough track laid by enslaved hands for moving human cargo. There, Jesse pointed to wheel ruts beside the rails. Wagon tracks, recent. They'd been following intelligence extracted from Pike's documents. The Blue Wren operation extended beyond Sagebrush Crossing, a network of auxiliary camps where problem prisoners were sent. Dry Willow Gulch was the furthest, the place men went and didn't return from. "How many you reckon?" Hutchins asked. Jesse dismounted to study the tracks. 3 wagons, maybe 4, heavy loaded. They pushed on as the sun peaked. The landscape grew harsher, red rock walls narrowing into a canyon that trapped heat like an oven. Nora's shirt stuck to her back, but she didn't complain. Every mile might bring them closer to men who'd been suffering far longer than she'd been uncomfortable. At a wooden trestle bridge spanning a dry wash, they found their first real evidence. A guard post, recently abandoned. Coffee still warm in a tin cup. "They know we're coming," Crawford said. Jesse studied the horizon. "Or Pike got word out before we caught him." They proceeded more carefully, scouts riding ahead. The canyon narrowed further until the railroad track and a rough wagon road were the only passages through. Perfect country for an ambush. It came at the worst possible spot where the trail squeezed between 2 boulder falls. Rifle fire erupted from above. The posse scattered for cover as bullets whined off rocks. "How many?" Hutchins shouted over the gunfire. 4, maybe 5. Jesse had pulled Nora behind a large boulder. "They've got the high ground." A federal marshal named Williams tried to advance and took a bullet in the shoulder. Doc Morrison, who'd insisted on coming, scrambled to reach him under covering fire. "We're pinned," Crawford called out. Jesse was checking his rifle when Nora grabbed his arm. "The railroad cut. It curves behind that ridge." He saw what she meant. The track disappeared into a narrow cut blasted through the rock. If someone could get through there. "I'll go," he said. "You'll get shot the moment you break cover." She was already checking her father's Winchester. "I'm smaller, faster. Cover me." Before he could protest, she was moving. The posse laid down suppressing fire as Nora sprinted for the railroad cut. Bullets sparked off the rails beside her, but she made it to the shelter of the cut. The passage was barely wide enough for a handcar, walls of red rock rising on either side. She followed it, hearing the gunfight echoing behind her. The cut curved sharply, then opened onto a ledge behind the ambushers' position. 5 men crouched among the rocks, focused on the posse below. She recognized 2 from Dune's crew. They hadn't posted a rear guard, too confident in their superior position. Nora braced the Winchester against a rock. Her father had taught her to shoot rabbits at this distance. These targets were bigger. Her first shot took the nearest gunman in the shoulder, spinning him around. The others turned in shock as she worked the lever, firing again. The second shot went wide, but it sent them scrambling for new cover. "Behind us!" one shouted. Now they were the ones pinned, caught between Nora above and the posse below. The fight turned quickly. 2 surrendered, throwing down their weapons. One tried to flee down the cliff face and fell badly, breaking his leg. The other 2 kept fighting until Crawford and a marshal flanked them from another direction. When the dust settled, they had 5 prisoners and crucial intelligence. The one with the broken leg, desperate for medical attention, talked freely. "Camp's another 3 miles up the gulch," he gasped as Doc Morrison splinted his leg. "Maybe 30 prisoners, dozen guards. But Pike sent word they're clearing out, sending the workers west on the rail line." "When?" Hutchins demanded. Started yesterday? Probably moved half already. Jessie found Nora sitting on a rock, Winchester across her knees. That was reckless, he said. That was necessary. She looked up at him. I'm tired of being too late. He sat beside her. You shot a man. I shot at several men, only hit one for certain. Her voice was steady, but he saw the slight tremor in her hands. Is it wrong that I don't feel bad about it? They were trying to kill us. Kill you. Feeling bad comes later, sometimes years later. He covered her hands with his. But no, it's not wrong. You saved lives today. Sheriff Hutchins approached. Miss McKay, that was fine shooting. But from here on, you stay with the main group. She nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her aware of every scrape and bruise. They pushed on, urgency driving them despite the heat. The railroad tracks led them true through the narrowing gulch to where it opened into a hidden valley. There, sprawled against the cliff face, lay the auxiliary camp. It was worse than the mine. Crude barracks surrounded by wire fencing, guard towers at the corners, and on a siding, a line of cattle cars being loaded with human cargo. They're still here, Crawford said. We're not too late. Hutchins organized quickly. Williams, take 4 men around the north side. Crawford, you and the marshal hit the south. Jessie, Miss McKay, you're with me and Doc. We go straight in while they're distracted. The multi-pronged assault worked. Guards expecting trouble from the trail didn't anticipate attacks from 3 directions. Some surrendered immediately, hired guns with no loyalty to a lost cause. Others fought briefly before seeing the futility. Nora stayed close to Jessie as they pushed toward the cattle cars. Through the slats, she could see faces men packed in like livestock, some barely conscious in the heat. Jessie shot the locks off, and prisoners began stumbling out. Water, one croaked. Please. Doc Morrison took charge, organizing aid while Nora and others distributed canteens. She searched each face, hoping against hope. You looking for someone, Miss? An older prisoner, supporting a younger man, studied her with keen eyes despite his condition. Angus McKay, red hair going gray, writes his G like a Q. The man's face lit up. Teacher McKay, he was here. Miss, they moved him 2 days ago with the first group. Her heart sank. Where? Construction camp near Flagstaff. Railroads building through there. Heard the guards talking they sold the strongest workers to the construction bosses. Jessie appeared at her elbow. We'll find him. Nora. He was here, she told him. 2 days ago. He was right here. While the marshals processed prisoners and guards alike, Hutchins questioned the camp supervisor, a weasel-faced man named Garrett, who folded immediately. I just follow orders, he whined. Pike said move the assets. That's what we did. Assets? Nora's voice was ice. You mean human beings? It's just business. Miss, they owed money. Jessie's fist ended his explanation. Hutchins made no move to intervene as Garrett spat blood. The manifests. Garrett gasped. Got copies in the office? Show where everyone went. The office yielded a treasure trove of evidence names, dates, destinations. Nora found her father's entry, A. McKay, transferred to Western Rail Construction, Flagstaff Division. That's federal jurisdiction. One of the marshals said, We can telegraph ahead. Have them waiting. As the sun set over Dry Willow Gulch, they made camp amid the liberation. 31 men freed, some who'd been captive for years. The makeshift prison would be destroyed, its lumber used for cook fires that night. Nora sat apart, studying the manifest by firelight. So many names, so many lives stolen. Jessie brought her coffee and beans. Eat, he said. Long ride tomorrow. He's out there, she said. Still a prisoner, just with different masters. Not for long. Jessie sat beside her. Marshals are already sending telegraphs. By the time we reach Flagstaff, the construction camps will be surrounded. She leaned against him, drawing comfort from his presence. I used to think the world was simple. Good people, bad people, clear lines between them. But this, she gestured at the papers. Bankers and businessmen treating lives like inventory. Legal contracts hiding slavery. It's all so much bigger than I imagined. Evil usually is, Jessie said quietly. That's why it takes good people standing up to stop it. Around them, freed men shared their stories with the marshals. Tales of debt manipulation, of families told their loved ones were dead, of labor that enriched distant investors who never dirtied their hands. Miss McKay. A young man approached hesitantly. I wanted to thank you. My name's David Winters. I heard you're a teacher. I am, Nora said. I'd like to learn to read proper when this is over, if you'll have me as a student. She smiled, the first real smile in days. I'd be honored, Mr. Winters. As he walked away, Jessie squeezed her hand. See, you're already rebuilding. That night, under stars brilliant in the clear desert air, Nora lay in her bedroll thinking about the journey ahead. Flagstaff was 2 days hard riding. Her father might be moved again before they arrived. Pike might have Confederates still operating. But for tonight, 31 men slept free. Tomorrow, they'd ride for Flagstaff and whatever waited there. She touched the Winchester beside her bedroll, her father's gun. Now hers, carried into battles he'd never imagined his daughter would fight. Can't sleep, Jessie's voice came from the next bedroll. Thinking about your father. About all of it. How many other camps are out there? How many other pikes and dunes? She turned to face him in the darkness. This doesn't end with finding my father, does it? No, he said honestly. But that doesn't mean we stop fighting. Even in the darkness, she could sense his smile. You think I'm letting you ride into the next fight alone? Someone needs to watch your back when you go charging through railroad cuts. She reached across the space between them, finding his hand. Thank you. Get some sleep. Nora, tomorrow we ride for Flagstaff. She closed her eyes, holding onto his hand like an anchor. Somewhere ahead, her father labored under another false contract, but the net was closing. Justice was coming. And Nora McKay, shopkeeper's daughter turned fighter for justice, would see it done. The dust had barely settled on Sagebrush Crossing when Angus McKay stepped off the afternoon stage. Thinner, marked by years of hardship, but standing straight as the man who'd left 5 years ago. Nora flew from the general store's entrance into his arms. My girl, he whispered into her hair. My brave, brave girl. The federal operation at Flagstaff had been swift and complete. 37 men freed from the construction camps. Including Angus, the railroad bosses claimed ignorance, but their foremen sang readily enough when faced with federal marshals. The paper trail led back to a network of operations across 3 territories, all feeding off debt and desperation. Now, 2 weeks later, Sagebrush Crossing was learning to live again. The Blue Wren mine stood empty, its assets frozen pending investigation. Some families had left, following the money to other boomtowns, but others stayed, determined to build something better. Town meeting in an hour. Jessie reminded Nora as they watched Angus reunite with old friends. Council wants to vote on the new water rights. She nodded, still marveling at having her father back. The proposal's solid. With the mine's stranglehold broken, we can finally drill a community well. Jessie had thrown himself into the town's revival with unexpected passion. His small ranch had become a gathering place for planning sessions, and his level head had earned respect from longtime residents and newcomers alike. Miss Nora, young Tommy Brennan, raced up, gap-toothed grin wider than ever. My PA says to tell you the new schoolhouse roof is done. The old storage building had been converted with volunteer labor, twice the size of Nora's previous teaching space, with real windows and a wood floor. David Winters from Dry Willow Gulch had been her first adult student, but now she had 12 men learning their letters alongside the children. The town meeting packed the church. Sheriff Hutchins called for order as families squeezed into pews. The agenda was simple but vital: water rights, the empty mine's fate, and election of a new mayor after Garrett's hasty departure. First matter. Hutchins announced, "The territorial government has released the Blue Wren's water claims. Proposal is to drill a public well. Cost to be shared among all households and businesses." The vote was unanimous. Even those who'd been skeptical couldn't argue with water independence. Second matter, the mine itself. "We've had an offer from Silver City interests, but also a proposal from our own Samuel Crawford." The blacksmith stood, his powerful frame filling the aisle. "Group of us been talking, miners, mechanics, folks who know the work. Mine's still got silver, just not the easy fortunes Pike promised. We're proposing a cooperative, equal shares, fair wages, safety first, no company store, no debt tricks. And the startup costs," someone called. "Judge Morse says the seized assets can be auctioned. We pool resources, buy it fair and square, run it right this time." The discussion ran hot, but when the vote came, the cooperative won. Sagebrush Crossing would own its own future. Last matter. Hutchins said, "We need a mayor. Floor's open for nominations." "I nominate Angus McKay." Reverend Townsend said immediately, "Man's got the respect of everyone here." Angus stood slowly. "I'm honored, Reverend, but 5 years in chains taught me something. I'm not a politician, I'm a shopkeeper, and happy to be one." He smiled at his daughter. "I nominate Jesse Calder." Jesse nearly choked on his surprise. "Mr. McKay, I'm not even from here originally." "Neither was half this town." Angus interrupted. "You came back when it mattered, stood up when it cost you. That's the kind of leader we need." "I second the nomination," Crawford called out. Others voiced agreement. Jesse looked at Nora, who smiled encouragement. When the vote was taken, he won by a wide margin. After the meeting, as families drifted into the cooling evening, Nora and Jesse walked toward Concho Creek. The spot where he'd planned to build a windmill was cleared and level. "Mayor Calder," she teased, "has a ring to it." "Rather just be Jesse." He pulled her close. "Your father set me up. He likes you. Says you're the only man who ever made me mad enough to steal a horse and brave enough to shoot a bandit." "About that," Jesse turned her to face him, "I've been thinking about the future. The town's getting back on its feet. Your father's home. The school's growing." "All good things," she agreed, wondering at his serious tone. "They are, but there's something missing." He dropped to one knee, pulling out a simple gold band. "Nora McKay, you asked me once if I sleep alone. I'd like to answer that question permanent-like. Will you marry me?" She stared at the ring, then at him, then launched herself into his arms, nearly knocking him over. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring on her finger as they both laughed, years of tension finally releasing into joy. When they walked back to town, hand in hand, they found half the population pretending they hadn't been watching from windows and doorways. The wedding took place 6 weeks later on a crisp autumn day. Reverend Townsend performed the ceremony in the packed church. Angus walked his daughter down the aisle. Ezekiel Boone stood as Jesse's best man, and the freedmen from both the mine and Dry Willow Gulch served as honor guards. Nora wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit. Jesse had never looked more handsome in his new suit, though he tugged at the collar occasionally. When Townsend pronounced them married, the cheer from the congregation could be heard clear to the territorial border. The reception filled the main street. Tables groaned under food contributed by every family. The miners' wives had organized everything with military precision, determined to give their teacher the celebration she deserved. Music came from a makeshift band fiddle, guitar, and Crawford's surprising skill on harmonica. As the sun set, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Angus raised a toast. "To my daughter and new son, you showed this town that one light can pierce the darkness. May your light shine always." "To justice," Sheriff Hutchins added. To freedom, Ezekiel said solemnly. To home, Jesse finished, eyes on his bride. The party continued late, but eventually Nora and Jesse slipped away to the small ranch by the creek. The windmill Jesse had finally erected turned lazily in the evening breeze, pumping fresh water into a new trough. It's not much, Jesse said as they stood on the porch. But it's ours. It's perfect. Nora leaned into her husband. Though we'll need to expand when the children come. Children, he grinned. Already planning ahead. Always, teacher's habit. She kissed him softly. But tonight, just us. Inside the simple home. A lamp burned on the table, the same lantern that had first lit their way into the mine's darkness. Jesse had mounted it on a special stand as promised, a reminder of what one small light could accomplish. No more sleeping alone, Cowboy, Nora whispered. Never again, he promised. 5 years later, Sagebrush Crossing had transformed. The cooperative mine operated successfully, providing steady work at fair wages. The school had grown into a proper academy, with Nora overseeing 3 other teachers. Jesse served his 3rd term as mayor, having brought the railroad through town on fair terms and established the territory's first lending library. Their home by the creek had indeed expanded. 2 children now played in the yard, while Angus, retired from the store, but not from life, taught them to fish in the shallow pools. The windmill still turned faithfully, its blades catching the endless desert wind. On quiet evenings, Nora and Jesse would sit on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains. Sometimes old pain would surface Jesse's nightmares from the trail, Nora's memories of those desperate days searching for her father, but they faced them together, as they faced everything now. Do you ever regret it? Jesse asked one such evening. The quiet life you had before. Nora laughed, their youngest daughter asleep in her arms. That wasn't living, that was just existing. She looked at him with the same fire that had driven her into a mine shaft years ago. This is living, every challenging, wonderful, difficult day of it. As stars emerged in the vast western sky, the lantern glowed softly in the window, a small light that had once pierced terrible darkness, now simply warming a happy home, but ready, always ready, should darkness threaten again. The creek murmured its endless song. The windmill creaked its rhythm, and in a corner of New Mexico territory, justice and love had taken root in the hard desert soil, blooming into something beautiful and enduring. In Sagebrush Crossing, no one slept alone anymore. They slept as a community, as families, as people who'd learned that together they could face down any darkness and win. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale. Please share in the comments below where you're listening from so we can connect and exchange thoughts about the story. If you enjoyed this Western romance, please subscribe to Wild West Night, give this video a like, and hit the hype button to help more people discover these frontier tales. Your support helps bring these stories of courage, justice, and love to listeners around the world.